top passion of the day?
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and it's totally true. And the reason is because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, if you're not having fun doing it, and you don't really love it, you're going to give up.
So just go and do it, try, learn from it. You'll fail at some things. That's a learning experience that you need so that you can take that on to the next experience. And don't let people who you may respect and who you believe know what they're talking about, don't let them tell you it can't be done. Because often they will tell you it can't be done, and it's just because they don't have the courage to try it.
I think people that look for great ideas to make money aren't nearly as successful as those who say, okay, what do I really love to do? What am I excited about? What do I know something about? What's kind of interesting and compelling?
It's very rewarding when you work on something you think is going to make a big difference. And yeah, it's a little bit harder, but I think the passion that one might bring with it brings so much more energy to that you're more likely to succeed.
You have to have an emotional investment in what you're doing. If you don't love what you're doing, failure is pretty much guaranteed. Success is not guaranteed by any means, but failure is much more likely if you don't love what you're doing.
If you know exactly what you want to be, you need to spend as much time with people that are actually that already.
One of the things that I do is I question a lot of things. And you can do that in a good way and a bad way, but hopefully if you try to get people to motivate why they're doing something and their way of thinking, the worst thing you can end up with is a situation where you get told, well, this is the way it's always been. Mm-hmm. That's the worst ever. That's a non-answer. Instead, ask yourself, given everything you have today, is there a way we can make this better?
And so when we're coming up with ideas, we always ask ourselves, what kind of new market is this creating? And then also, what part of my day and what problem is it solving? And so I've gone as far as taking an entire catalog of my day from the moment I open my eyes and writing down every single thing I do. And then asking myself, is there something here?
If you're not coming up with 10 ideas a day, that's why I have this thing. If I'm not filling up this page every single day, then my idea muscle will atrophy. And I started this in 2001, and I still do it every single day. You have to come up with ideas every single day, or the idea muscle atrophies. The good news is, after about 6 months of doing that, you're like a machine. People get surprised at how many ideas you could just have anywhere.
But understand that naturally nobody is interested in your idea. The world could care less, and you have to persuade them, and you have to show that you're the one person out there that can do it.
When it comes to changing the world, what I learned from Steve Jobs is, if you believe in a Macintosh, if you believe in iPhone, iPod, iPad, if you believe enough, then you will see it. Because other people will believe in it. Other people will create software. Other people will create products. So you need to foster the belief in what you are dreaming so that it becomes a reality, which is very different than saying, I don't expect anybody to believe it until I see it. You need people to believe it before they can see it.
Don't necessarily think that you have to have the home run and the huge Apple computer on your first start. I spent a long time in my life with skills just building little devices for fun. For fun is one of the key things, because that drives you to think and think and think and make it better and better and better than you ever would if you're doing it for a company. Build things at first for yourself that you would want.
For somebody aspiring to take things to the next level or to even surpass their wildest dreams, there's always going to have to be an element of luck, but I think more important is putting yourself in a business that can be ubiquitous, that really doesn't have limits. Because otherwise, there's always going to be a grind to it, is putting yourself in a business that can be ubiquitous, that really doesn't have limits. Because otherwise, there's always going to be a grind to it, But if the business, if it can't be something that you can visualize every business using or every consumer using, it's going to be tough to scale to be big enough or to have the perceived value.
You want an idea about what you can say. I know it sounds like a bad idea, but here's specifically why it's actually a great one. You want to sound crazy, but you want to actually be right.
Because when you're trying to differentiate, when you're trying to do something different, there's going to be that gut moment, that gut sense. Is this right? Is this not right? If you're not having doubt, you're not pushing the boundaries far enough.
Don't think about how do I get big fast. That will happen if you actually build something super meaningful and super important. So don't think about, what is the quickest way to success? Think about what is the best way to building something important that the world really needs.
This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist?
So when we see a kid with a lemonade stand, it's different than when we see a vending machine selling lemonade, even if it's exactly the same product, because the story around it is what people are paying for. So when I meet small business people, all I ask them is not what's their balance sheet, but what's their story. Why should I pick you? Why do I care about what you're doing? And if you start giving me all this inside baseball statistics about why you're 2% better than some other competitor, I'm already glazed over, because that's not part of the way I see the world.
I have to want this to exist in the world. I have to not, so it's a similar rule, just say, if this was successful and I had nothing and I was not involved and I got no money off it or would I want it to do well? And that's a great check, I think, to know if you really feel good about the idea and can be passionate about it.
One of the things I advise entrepreneurs to do is when you have an idea, so a classic entrepreneurial impulse is to hold the idea close to you and not go tell people because, oh, the idea is so special.
Right.
That's almost always a mistake. Go talk to
Why is that a mistake? Yeah.
It's a mistake because your actual real competitive advantage is not that you have this idea that you have locked away in your closet, which may or may not be accurate and you have no idea which it is. Your actual competitive advantage is if you're assembling the intelligence around, does this idea work? What is the right team? What is the right learnings? And we're essentially in motion.
The hardest thing to do is start. You have all these ideas and everyone has an idea, but it's really about executing the idea and building the idea and attracting other people to help you work on the idea. That is the biggest challenge. But the way to begin is to get the idea out of your head, draw it out, talk about it, program it if you're a programmer, or make it if you're building something.
Like, you don't have to be the best, but you have to be dangerous, right? You have to learn just enough to be dangerous to build an idea, concept it, and show it to the world. And then it turns out there are lots of other people, including all 170 employees that work at Instagram, who are much better at doing all that stuff than I am. But you need to find people who can, be drawn to the idea that you build, and then they end up taking it and making it even better.
One way to conceptualize what makes a good product is, good engineering is part of it, good design is part of it, but really it's, one way I think about it is maximizing the probability that someone shows up at the front door of, your store or your website or whatever it is and ends up with a solved problem.
And oftentimes the best methodology is to start with the perfect experience with just one person. Get that right, and then figure out how to scale something great, instead of scaling something not so great and then trying to improve it. That's really hard to do.
And so I think when you are starting a new business, you don't want to go after giant markets. You want to go after small markets, and you want to take over those markets quickly.
Constantly seek criticism. A well thought out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold. And you should seek that from everyone you can, but particularly your friends.
If you're not utilizing an online community, then you're at a disadvantage to those who are. You can be asking online communities what they think about your ideas, or if they have any advice with what you're working on. Not only will you hear from people who are passionate about the subject, but you'll be hearing from people all around the world, each with their own experiences and stories that can help you.
And there are a lot of people from whom we can learn a lot. And I think, like, you know, the one piece of advice is, like, don't underestimate anyone you come across, ever. Right. Like, whether they're, you know, a blue-collar worker waiting for the bus, or they're, you know, helping you at they're the server or bartender at the restaurant, or they're a lower-ranking employee. I mean, the smartest leaders I've ever seen have always gone around the room and asked for everybody's opinion.
Most startups that fail do it ultimately because they did not make something that people wanted. They made something that, you know, that they thought people would want, but they were either in denial about it, you know, whether it was actually any good, or somebody else came along and made something that people wanted even more.
The best piece of advice that we've figured out as we've been doing Courseware is not to let other people distract what you're doing. There's always haters that say, your idea is stupid, this idea is never going to work, don't even bother doing that because someone else is going to do it before you do. And if we listened to all that feedback that we were getting, all that negative feedback, we would never have built things, we would never have prototyped things. And that's how we really got to where we are. Like, we saw things that we wanted to build, and we just went out and built them. And it turns out when you build stuff that you like to use, there's a good chance that there's thousands of other people that want to use it too.
And so it's not just about doing focus groups, it's not just about, you know, double checking your vision, it really is about integrating this concept of testing our ideas rigorously throughout the product development process, throughout the marketing process, even as we scale up.
But what you really need to do is think about what is the smallest possible test that I can run for this idea, for this concept, for this theory, get it out there, and get customers using it. Because your customers are going to be the ones to tell you if it's really working or not.
Like there's almost this expectation that you have to have in your mind, this sort of, I'm going to change the world, sort of make a dent in the universe kind of ambition, right? But it's actually okay early on to just kind of solve small problems in layers until you actually get to a point where you have the capacity to do that.
What this all comes down to is doing something exceptional for your users, whether it's in community, whether it's in connection, or whether it's in design. This is our big advantage as a startup, is that we can actually get away with doing this. We can make this the core part of why we're doing business.
I think you should be spending your money on teaching and sharing, and so that might mean hiring a writer or two, perhaps, instead of a marketing person. You know, and start writing and start getting people to listen to what you're saying. You can't talk about yourself all the time because no one's going to come back for that. You have to talk about things that are relevant to your industry or ideas that you have, and start to build that audience up.
I do think that one thing that's important is, especially if you're a founder or a technical founder, is to realize that you can't do everything, and even if you can, you shouldn't.
You should find a great partner no matter what it is that you're doing, and you should look for someone who is very high intelligence, very high energy, and very high integrity. And you need all three of those. You can't compromise on any one of them. Otherwise, you'll end up with either someone who's not smart, which does you no good, or someone who's not hardworking, which also does you no good, or the worst case is you end up with a smart, hardworking crook who ends up working against your interests. And integrity is something that takes a lot of time spent with someone to figure out.
The most important thing when you're working with people early is that you guys line up on what your goals are. That sounds really basic, but you can totally, it can be fine. You can want to build a small business that makes money and you don't have to go to an office every day. Or you can want to build a huge company. You can want to build Google. But I think you have to be really, really aligned on that.
When a lot of corporations they might call them core values or guiding principles or so on, but the problem is usually they're very lofty sounding. They kind of read like a press release the marketing department put out. They sound just like their competitors, and maybe you learn about it on day one of your job, but then it becomes this meaningless plaque on the lobby wall. Well, we wanted to come up with committable core values, and by committable, meaning we're willing to hire or fire people based on those values, completely independent of their actual job performance.
The definition of values is they're the behaviors or principles that you religiously adhere to within your company. When I say religious, I mean that no amount of data will sway you from those principles, and the degree to which that you have the courage to maintain your conviction around those ideas is the degree to which you're going to be successful over the long term.
A company is simply a group of people, as a leader of people, you have to be a great listener, You have to be a great motivator. You have to be very good at praising and looking for the best in people. You know, people are no different from flowers. If you water flowers, they flourish. If you praise people, they flourish. And that's a critical attribute of a leader.
So I kind of like half jokingly with a lot of people say that, you know, my job is basically like to be the assistant for the rest of the company. Like my job is to make sure that like you have what you need, that it's and basically you have everything you need to kick ass. Like that's my job. If you don't have that, then let me know because I'm not doing my job.
You know, there are a lot of things that are outside of your control. A lot of external circumstances will determine the success of your idea, whether the market timing is right for this new kind of service, or whether people, whether a customer, like the economy is right for your kind of service, right? Whether you meet the right people who will finance your company. Many external circumstances are like outside of your control and but will affect the outcome, and you have to be okay with that.
Another quality that I think is important is kind of being flexible-minded or open-minded. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a vision for your idea or your product, but you need to be open to changes.
So many things go wrong when you're starting a company, and often I think people ask, what mistakes should you avoid making? And my answer to that question is don't even bother trying to avoid mistakes because you're going to make tons of mistakes, right? And the important thing is actually learning quickly from whatever mistakes you make and not giving up, right? And I mean, there are things every single year of Facebook's existence that could have killed us or made it so that it just seemed like moving forward and making a lot of progress just seemed intractable, but you just kind of bounce back and you learn, and nothing is impossible. You just have to kind of keep running through the walls.
The two things we really zero in on people are, two things. They sound simple, they end up being very difficult. Courage and genius. Courage is the one we talk about a lot because it's the one that people can learn. Courage, which is to say not giving up in the face of adversity. Just being absolutely determined to succeed, is something that you can force yourself to do. It can be very painful. You can force yourself to do it. The genius part is a little bit hard to force yourself to do. Courage without genius might not get you where you need to go, but genius without courage almost certainly won't.
And I think the reality is just, not quite so glamorous. There's an ugly side to being an entrepreneur. And also just more importantly, what you're actually spending your time on is just a lot of hard work. Sam mentioned this, but you're basically just sitting at your desk, heads down, focused, answering customer support emails, doing sales, figuring out hard engineering problems. So it's really important that you kind of go in with eyes wide open.
Optimism has a place, but I think even more so for the first-time entrepreneur, you need to be pragmatically pessimistic. What I mean by that is you need to define all of the worst-case scenarios in terms of financial loss, time loss, etc. Look at what you will learn if that happens and accept and come to terms with that before you ever start. If you don't do that and you go straight into battling the world, trying to conquer the world with rose-colored glasses on, the first time you hit a major hiccup, you're going to become really demoralized and you will quit.
If you don't love it, you won't make it through the long period of pain that is inevitable. So make sure that you take care of yourself during the process. Make sure that you take care of your mental health, your physical health while you're doing it because it's a long road.
In the game of chess, the average chess player knows their next 1, 2, 3 moves. Amateur. How many guys play chess here? Any chess players here? The average chess player knows their next 1, 2, 3 moves. A pro knows 4 to 5. A master knows 6 to 10. A grandmaster knows their next 11 to 15 moves. By the way, the same thing you see here with chess is the same thing with the game of life. Most people live life, they have no clue what their next 10 moves are going to be. They just know their next 1 to 3 moves. A lot of people in life want to do move number 14 in move number 2. Wrong timing. I don't know if that made sense. A lot of people want to do move number 14 at move number 2. And it
have to be patiently aggressive. Because you want your money to double now.
Exactly.
It might take 10 years.
Yeah, but if you are willing to do the 10 years, it may double 40 times.
I think you got to have a dream.
The School of Greatness.
Really? Yeah.
Please welcome Lewis House.
We have my man, Patrick Bet David, in the house. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you.
Excited to see someone in person. And we met, I don't know, probably 3 years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago?
Yeah.
Where you interviewed me for your show.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing your content blowing up before that, and it's blown up even more. And I think you do an amazing job of expressing your opinion through your experience and
and I would ask everybody, it's just a basic question everybody, what's the key to success? What is it? I'm like, you know what? Years later, I said, in my mind, the biggest key to success, almost anybody I see that takes it to a whole different level, the highest levels, the difference between them and other people is their sequencing. And what I mean by sequencing is the following. So you and I may have the same vision of what we want to do in life, okay? You want to get here, I want to get here. This could be anything. We both want to build $1 billion company. Fine. We both want to be building a company that does $100 million a year. We both want to go into football. We both want to go play at the highest level. We both want to go out there and be great sales. Whatever it may be, that's the ultimate, right? If my order of steps I take to go here isn't as efficient as yours because your sequencing is better, you're going to get there faster than I am. And I may never even get there. Because I'm trying to do move 14 on move 3, and that's the most common thing that you see. One day I woke up, I was in a relationship, and I'm 26 years old, 27 years old, 26, 25 years old, and I'm trying to get my business going. I wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, I get a text. Babe, I have to tell you this, as much as I love you, I don't see this relationship going anywhere. One of those texts, because I think my mom is right. You love your business more than you love me, and I barely see you. I only see you once a week. You're working so hard. First text. Then, message. I pressed the message to listen to it. My mom. You know, there used to be a time they used to love me, and you would call me and tell me you love me. What happened to those? What happened to my little son that used to love his mother?
Call me every day, hug me.
That's the part. So now I got a breakup on the line. I got a guilt trip from my mom. That's still 6:02 right now. Then I get an email.
You haven't even got out of bed yet.
I haven't even gotten out of bed yet. Then I get an email that's been in the box for a while, and I look at it. It's from my #1 client that I was about to expect like a $15,000 commission, and that's a lot of money at that time. And my #1 client says he's leaving me for the following reasons. And then at the same time, the next email is my agent saying I resign. My #1 agent resigns. This all happens before 6:05, 6:10. So I'm in bed, anxiety is high, panic is high. I have no idea what to do. In that moment, all I thought about is, what are my next 5 moves? What do I need to do next? From that moment on, everything I did with business, I would ask myself, I'm going to do this next, my next 10, 15 moves. Or what would this guy do? This guy that built an empire, what would he do? What are we going to do here? What can I do to be better than this guy? What can I do to be more efficient? And what can I do to speed up the process to get here? But everything came down to your next 5 moves. So you're asking the question, is the first move the most important? Absolutely it is. If you don't know your next move can hurt the chances of you even getting to the 5th move.
Yeah.
So it's always your next move that matters the most.
What is the next move that everyone should be thinking about?
So the first thing you have to do is you gotta, last night I'm at Rafi's place, and I'm having dinner with my 3 buddies. None of us are supposed to do anything in life. One of them is Steve and Affo. They're running a $300 billion a year business. Steve was the Michael Jordan of our high school. Okay, he was a great basketball player, but we're all 2.0 GPA kids.
Right.
And Armand
was great salesman.
Yes.
2.0 guys.
Yes. And Armand was always a fighter. He would always get in trouble. Like, he was a guy that, he's a 5'6" guy, you don't want to fight. Like, you go to a party, you know the smallest guy, you go to a party, and this 5'6" guy would go to a party, and he would stand there, and he would say, that guy's looking at me. I'm like, bro, he's not looking at you. No, I know he's looking at me. He's looking at me. I'm like, I promise you he's not looking. He's the kind of guy that would walk up and just punch the guy in the face.
Just for no reason.
Just for no reason. What is the matter with you, right? That's his wiring.
Yeah.
But we're all together yesterday. Now, we all have kids.
Really? People want to be more like you.
Really?
And you know what? For the fate of humankind, I think it would be great to have more Elon Musks. So what do we need to do to become more like Elon?
I don't know if it's, I think it maybe sounds better than it is. I mean, honestly, like,
there's a friend of mine who's got a great saying about creating a company, which is trying to build a company and have it succeed is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. So, I mean, what tends to happen is it's sort of quite exciting for the first several months of starting a company, and then reality sets in. Things don't go as well as planned. Customers aren't signing up. The technology or the product isn't working as well as you thought. And then that can sometimes be compounded by a recession, and it can be very, very painful for several years. So I think, frankly, starting a company, I would advise people to have a high pain tolerance.
Yeah. And thanks for reminding us of the harsh, very harsh and brutal reality of launching a startup. There is that Elon Musk / Tony Stark mystique. People think, you are, Robert Downey Jr. modeled his character, Tony Stark, Iron Man, on you. It's easy, it's fun. You're a superhero titan of industry. But it's really hard. It's really difficult. And it's something that requires perseverance and grit. Do you fear that maybe in this generation or the younger generation that they don't have that perseverance and grit to take on these really tough challenges?
I think some people do. But no, I think it is definitely true that, I mean, maybe there are occasionally companies that get created where there's not an extended period of extreme pain, but I'm not aware of very many of such instances. But I do think that new great entrepreneurs are born every day, and we'll continue to see amazing companies get built. But I would definitely advise people who are starting a company to expect a long period of quite high difficulty.
To know what Simon and other successful entrepreneurs have to say about building unstoppable confidence, check out my 254 Confidence series, where every day for the next 254 days, I will send you a morning video for free to help you build your confidence. The link to join is in the description below.
The benefit of hearing what everybody else has to think before you render your opinion.
What guarantee do I have that your stuff will work? To which my answer was none. It's like a hammer. You can use it broadly or narrowly. You can build a table, you can build a house. It's the same tool.
I wake up every morning. Espresso keep me going. I wake up every morning.
I think the word entrepreneur is bandied about too loosely. That not everyone who owns a small business is an entrepreneur. There are small business owners and there are entrepreneurs.
What's an entrepreneur?
And you can find entrepreneurs in big companies. It doesn't mean that they're small business owners, right? I think entrepreneurs are problem solvers. I think
rather than risk takers.
Yeah. I think fundamentally there are plenty of risk takers, I think, who are entrepreneurs. There's a risk taker if you're a small business owner, right? You went out to start the business, but they're not the same, I don't think. And entrepreneurs are those ones who they're constantly looking to solve problems, and that's where I think they perceive opportunity or the mischief that you describe. I don't think inherently it's a sense of mischief. They're not trying to stir the pot for the sake of stirring the pot. I think that they see something and they're like, we can make that better, or we can fill that hole. And that's very much the way the famous entrepreneurs, the Elon Musks and the Richard Bransons, operate. They see gaps. They see things that don't work.
As did Jobs.
As did Jobs. They see things that could be better. I mean, Elon Musk was just interviewed by Chris Anderson at TED last week. And Chris Anderson, sort of near the end of the interview, it's online, go watch it, it's really great. Chris Anderson asks Elon Musk something to the effect of, why are you doing all these things? Like, why don't you just stick with Tesla and be done with it? Like, why do all the other stuff? And you look at, and Musk, you can see this look on his face, and he takes a long time to answer. He actually doesn't understand the question. He cannot understand why you wouldn't do that. And he sort of gets emphatic, which for Elon Musk is pretty amazing, because he doesn't get emphatic. But that's basically what it is. He gets emphatic and says, because I want to live in a world that's better than this, or words to that effect.
Most valuable piece of advice you'd give us to even attempt to create some of the value that you guys have done in both your very impressive companies?
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and it's totally true. And the reason is
is because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, if you're not having fun doing it and you don't really love it, you're going to give up. And that's what happens to most people, actually. If you really look at the ones that ended up, being successful, unquote, in the eyes of society and the ones that didn't, oftentimes it's the ones that are successful loved what they did so they could persevere when it got really tough. And the ones that didn't love it quit because they're sane, right? Who would want to put up with this stuff if you don't love it? So you're going to fail. So you got to love it. You got to have passion.
Joy.
I say to my girls all of the time that your real work is to figure out where your power base is and to work on the alignment of your personality, your gifts that you have to give, with the real reason why you're here. That's the number one thing you have to do, is to work on yourself and to fill yourself up and keep your cup full. Keep yourself full. Now, I used to be afraid of that. I used to be afraid, particularly from people who say, oh, she's so full of herself. She's so full of herself. And now I embrace it. I consider it a compliment that I am full of myself. Because you only when you're full, I'm full, I'm overflowing, my cup runneth over. I have so much to offer and so much to give. And I am not afraid of honoring myself. It's miraculous when you think about it.
One thing I really like about you is you are unusually fearless and willing to go in the face of other people telling you something is crazy. And I know a lot of pretty crazy people, you still stand out. Where does that come from, or how do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear.
So speaking of important things,
like people shouldn't think people shouldn't think, well, I feel fear about this and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. Like you'd have to be something mentally wrong if you shouldn't feel fear.
So you just feel it and let the importance of it drive you to do it anyway?
Yeah, actually something that can be helpful is fatalism to some degree. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. When starting SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were less than 10%.
It's the bad experience of traveling on airlines. I was actually trying to get to the BVI, the British Virgin Islands, one day from Puerto Rico, and the same lovely lady was waiting for me, and I'd been away for 3 weeks, and they don't care about you or me, particularly in the air. And so I then rang up Boeing and said, do you have any second-hand 747s?
No kidding. I mean, it was literally that you just sat in the airport and said, I'm starting an airline right now because I'm frustrated.
Exactly. And I think most of the best entrepreneurial ideas come out of frustration. I think, if you're frustrated about something, the best way of sorting it out is get out and do it, and you've got yourself a business.
We know from our past experiences that big things start small. The biggest oak starts from an acorn, and you've got to recognize, if you want to do anything new, you've got to be willing to let that acorn grow into a little sapling and then finally into a small tree, and maybe one day it'll be a big business on its own.
And in fact, that's one of the mottos for one of your initiatives, and forgive my pronunciation of the Latin, but gradatim ferociter. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means step by step ferociously. And it's the motto for Blue Origin. Basically, you can't skip steps. You have to put one foot in front of the other. Things take time. There are no shortcuts. And but you want to do those steps with passion and ferocity.
When I started business, because it's so difficult